You're sitting on your bed, replaying a simple argument, wondering if you really did overreact, or if you've somehow become too sensitive. She said you were making things up again. You laugh at yourself softly, but it doesn't feel funny anymore. You used to feel sure of who you were. Now, every choice feels like a test you're bound to fail. This is how toxicity often begins, not with shouting or cruelty, but with slow erosion. When love becomes a mirror that reflects only your flaws, confusion replaces safety. You start apologizing for things you never did. And in that quiet confusion, you lose your sense of self, one tiny piece at a time. At first, it doesn't look toxic at all. It looks like love, passionate, protective, and full of attention. She checks where you are, who you're with, and how you're feeling. It feels nice at first, like someone finally cares enough to notice the details. But soon, that care becomes surveillance. The "where are you?" turns into "why didn't you answer?" And the warmth that once felt like safety starts to feel like a cage. Toxic love doesn't begin with cruelty. It begins with intensity, the kind that makes you mistake obsession for affection. She needs constant reassurance, constant control, constant proof that you still belong to her. And slowly, you forget that love is supposed to feel free. At the beginning, she makes you feel like you're everything she's ever wanted. The compliments are constant. She calls you perfect, irreplaceable, the best thing that's ever happened to her. She mirrors your interests, your humor, even your wounds. It feels like destiny. But idealization is often the first step in control. When someone puts you on a pedestal, it's not always because they truly see you. Sometimes it's because they're creating an image they can later tear down. You become addicted to that early intensity, to the feeling of being seen so deeply. And when the warmth fades, you start chasing it, trying to become that perfect version she once adored. It's not love you're fighting for, it's the memory of being idealized. It doesn't happen overnight. One day, she just starts questioning your choices, who you talk to, where you go, what you wear. It's framed as love, concern, or protection. I just don't want people to misunderstand you. But beneath those words lies a quiet hunger for control. Control doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers. It disguises itself as care, slowly convincing you that you're safer when you obey. You stop seeing friends who make her uncomfortable. You change your routine to avoid fights. You shrink yourself until the relationship fits perfectly, but only for her. This isn't love losing its spark. This is love being replaced by fear. And the tragedy is, you might still call it love. Beneath every controlling behavior lies insecurity. A quiet, gnawing fear of being abandoned. A toxic girlfriend often doesn't want power for the sake of dominance. She wants certainty in a world that feels unsafe. Her control is a shield against rejection. When she becomes jealous or accusatory, it isn't always about you, it's about her own wounds. Maybe she's been betrayed before, or grew up feeling unseen. But instead of healing, she builds emotional walls made of suspicion. And in doing so, she traps both of you inside them. Understanding this doesn't excuse the harm. It just reveals the pain underneath it. Because sometimes, the most toxic people are the ones most terrified of being left behind. At the core of toxic behavior lies one of the oldest human fears, the fear of being left. When she feels that fear, logic fades. Every delay in response feels like rejection. Every moment of distance feels like proof you don't care. And instead of asking for reassurance, she lashes out, angry, emotional, desperate for control. To someone outside, it looks like manipulation. But inside her mind, it feels like survival. The thought of being abandoned triggers panic. And in that panic, she says and does things she later regrets. But by then, the damage is done. The relationship begins to revolve around her fear, not your freedom. Love becomes less about connection and more about containment, keeping you close so she doesn't have to face the emptiness inside. When fear and insecurity go unchecked, they evolve into manipulation, subtle at first, then consuming. She may twist your words, remind you of everything she's done for you, or cry until you change your mind. Each act pulls at your empathy, using guilt as the invisible thread that binds you. Manipulation isn't always cruel. Sometimes, it's wrapped in tears. It can sound like, if you really loved me, you'd understand. It's a plea disguised as a demand, a desperate way to feel loved, but one that erodes trust. Over time, you start doubting your own perspective, apologizing for simply having boundaries. That's how emotional manipulation works, not by breaking you outright, but by making you believe it's your fault for wanting to breathe. Once emotional manipulation becomes routine, isolation quietly follows. She may say things like, "Your friends don't really understand us," or "I don't feel comfortable when you're around them." Slowly, your world shrinks. The people who once grounded you become distant, replaced by her constant presence. It's not always obvious, it can feel like closeness, like spending more time together out of love. But real love doesn't ask you to give up your world. Toxic love does. It thrives in silence and separation, because isolation makes control easier. By the time you notice, you're standing in a smaller, quieter version of your life. One where every voice but hers has faded away. Every toxic relationship runs on a cycle: hurt, apology, and reward. After an argument or emotional outburst, she may cry, promise change, or shower you with affection. The sudden warmth feels like healing, but it's part of the pattern. This stage is powerful because it brings relief. The brain releases dopamine when the tension breaks, making you crave the peace after chaos. That's why people stay, not because they love the pain, but because they become addicted to the calm that follows it. It's the illusion of love returning, but it's only temporary. Soon, the storm starts again. Each time, the apologies sound sincere, the affection feels real, and that's what makes it so hard to leave. When you're in a toxic relationship, you don't notice how slowly you fade. You stop laughing the same way. You second-guess every sentence before you speak. You start walking on emotional eggshells, terrified that honesty will cause another explosion. You begin to believe that peace only comes when you stay silent. Your world shrinks into her moods. When she's happy, you can breathe. When she's angry, the air disappears. Over time, you lose the sound of your own voice. The worst part isn't the anger or the guilt. It's forgetting that love was ever supposed to feel like freedom. Eventually, the relationship becomes a storm. It's no longer about connection, but survival. Every day feels unpredictable. Some mornings start with love, others with silence or blame. You live in emotional weather you can't forecast. Conversations stop being about understanding, they become about avoiding conflict. You edit your truth to keep the peace. You smile when you're hurting, and say, "It's fine," when it's not. The relationship begins to feed on exhaustion, not affection. Toxic dynamics don't always end with explosions, sometimes they die quietly. You just wake up one day and realize there's nothing left to save, because love has been replaced by constant fear of the next storm. People often ask, "Why didn't you just leave?" But leaving isn't simple when love and fear are intertwined. You hold on to the good moments, the laughter, the apologies, the tenderness that still feels real. You tell yourself things will get better, that the version of her you fell in love with will come back. But that version was often just the beginning, the illusion built during the idealization phase. What keeps you there isn't weakness, it's the hope that love can heal what's broken. You believe that if you love harder, try more, stay longer, the toxicity will fade. The truth is, leaving a toxic relationship isn't about walking away from a person, it's about walking away from a dream. And that's what makes it so painfully hard. Awareness is the moment the spell begins to break. It's when you finally see the cycle for what it is, not love, not passion, but control and fear disguised as care. Recognition hurts. It forces you to confront the truth you've avoided for so long. That staying is costing you your peace. The first step toward freedom isn't leaving, it's seeing. Seeing the red flags that once looked like devotion. Seeing how much of yourself you've given up. Seeing that love shouldn't feel like walking through glass. The realization may come quietly, maybe after one more argument, one more night spent apologizing for your own pain. But in that silence, a small voice inside says, "This isn't love anymore." And that's where healing begins. Once you see the truth, the next step is learning how to protect your peace. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks. They let love in but keep harm out. A toxic partner may see your boundaries as rejection. They might accuse you of being distant or selfish. But setting limits is not cruelty, it's self-respect. It's saying, "I will love you, but not at the cost of myself." Healthy boundaries sound like, "I need space to think, that tone is not okay," or, "My feelings matter too." Each one reclaims a little piece of the self you lost. Boundaries don't end love, they teach it how to exist safely. Sometimes, love can only breathe again when space is created. Distance doesn't always mean giving up, it can mean giving yourself time to heal. When you step away from toxicity, you begin to hear your own thoughts again. You realize how quiet peace can feel compared to constant tension. The guilt will whisper that you're abandoning someone. But you're not. You're simply choosing to stop abandoning yourself. Distance gives you clarity. It helps you see what love is supposed to feel like: gentle, respectful, and mutual. Healing doesn't happen while you're still inside the storm. It begins the moment you walk out of it, even if you're trembling as you do. Healing isn't about proving who was right or wrong, it's about breaking the cycle. Even the person who was toxic carries pain that shaped their behavior. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. People hurt others when they haven't learned how to hold their own hurt. Healing means taking responsibility for your emotions instead of controlling others through them. It means learning that love isn't ownership, and closeness isn't control. For the one who leaves, healing means forgiving yourself for staying too long. And for the one left behind, it means facing the wounds that made love feel like a battlefield. Growth begins when both stop blaming and start understanding. When the pain fades, what remains is wisdom, the kind that reshapes how you see love. You begin to understand that real love doesn't demand constant proof. It doesn't control, fix, or cage. It allows both people to grow, even if that means growing apart. You realize love isn't about possession, it's about presence. It's about choosing each other freely, without fear. The healthiest love feels calm, steady, and kind, not because it lacks passion, but because it's built on peace. The moment you stop chasing chaos, you create space for love that's gentle enough to stay. That's when you finally understand. Love isn't meant to break you, it's meant to bring you home to yourself. When you finally heal, you stop seeing love as something to survive. You see it as something to share, freely, safely, without losing yourself. The lesson of a toxic relationship isn't bitterness. It's understanding your worth, your voice, your peace. You realize you were never too much, too emotional, or too sensitive. You were just giving love to someone who hadn't learned how to receive it. And now, you've learned how to give that love back to yourself. Peace doesn't come with revenge or closure, it comes when you stop needing either. It's the moment you breathe and whisper, "I'm free."